welcome again to the Persuasion Lab podcast. I'm your host, Moyse. The goal for this show is to help you improve your persuasion and sales skills. So we're going to have a range of experts on the show, and we're really looking for people who are at the top of their field, whether they are excellent researchers and scientists that are looking into the science of persuasion, or incredibly experienced and successful business leaders, whether that's marketing, sales, entrepreneurship, all with a view to give you the most practical and powerful strategies and tools to help improve and grow your own performance. And one of the things that we've been talking about quite a lot is the situation in the recession, and what does that pose to you in terms of your sales and your business growth as well. So I'm delighted in that view to have our next guest on the show, and he's a returning guest. So he has been in the software industry for over 3 decades and has held several sales leadership roles for both small and large businesses. He's currently the head of sales for Chai. He's also a fellow of the Institute of Sales Management, and he's considered a top 10 thought leader in several fields, including 5G and cloud. He's also a top 50 thought leader in the AI industry. So an incredibly experienced professional here today. So I'm truly delighted to have him back on the show. And I expect that this is going to be an incredibly informative discussion. If you are worried about the recession and what that means to your sales performance, your quota, your potential, then this is the episode for you. So please help me welcome someone who has 395 glowing recommendations on LinkedIn about what an amazing sales leader he is. Please welcome Mr. Ian Moyse. Ian, welcome back to the show.
Moyse, thank you for the invite. I do appreciate it. And it makes it sound like I've got the answer to everything, right? And I don't. We all go through the changes in business and the outside impacts, but it'd be good to have a discussion today about what we're observing, seeing, thoughts, and hopefully give your listeners some, if nothing else, some ideas or some reconciliation that they're not the only ones facing some of these challenges.
Yeah, totally agreed. I don't think anyone has all the answers, but if we create enough dots, then a picture is formed. So hopefully we can give people quite a few dots in that tapestry of their life. So why don't we start with the big question here? There's obviously a lot, the usual narratives you hear in a recession, right? And the words that are being used in the media, et cetera, are raising that kind of FUD, the fear, uncertainty, and doubt. Mm-hmm. You've been through quite a few recessions in your career. So you've definitely got the experience, and more importantly, you've grown sales performance during those times as well. So you've obviously done something that is different to how people perceive recession. So how would you advise sales professionals and leaders view a recession?
You can't ignore it, right? And you can't bury your head in the sand. But I think there's a real danger, like with anything, of listening to the hype, the news, and woe is me, and creating your own self-fulfilling prophecy of negativity that, oh my God, this is going to affect us. What are we going to do? Before it's even had an effect. I've had people sort of reacting that way when there's been no impact yet. Now, it's great to say, okay, there's something here that gives us some warning signs that we may have to face some challenges. Let's plan for that. Let's start discussing it. Great. But don't, start going down the road of tragedies coming, negativities coming, anxiety, and making particularly your salespeople anxious, because as we all know, engaging with customers, it's a people, even if it's video, although we are going back to some meetings now, and some people have gone back more fully, it is people you're dealing with. And if you sense nervousness or worry, or you feel that, right, you want to deal with people who are excited, passionate, realistic, and they may have the discussion with a customer about, well, how's this going to affect your business, what's happening, because if we're going to deal with you, we're concerned of you've got to be prepared to have the conversations, but it's how you handle that, the verbiage you use, and the attitude you approach it with. Do you approach it with an attitude of, we're going to give it our best, we're going to fight it. Yes, there may be some things coming up, but let's have a go? Or do you approach it with, we're going to lose? Has the England team gone out there thinking we ain't got a chance in hell, what's the point? Or have they gone there with positivity? My son does it with football, right? They've lost quite a few games because they've shuffled the teams around recently, but I haven't once heard him say, "Oh, I don't want to go, we're going to lose today." He absolutely focuses on, do you think we'll win today? We're going to score. We're going to try something new. It's all passion and excitement, but with realism, it's going to be hard. Oh, crikey, they're a good team. But it isn't negativity of I've already given up before I started. And that's the big challenge I think we face, because there is so much negativity, and we're seeing it now in the news, of course, of how long's the recession going to last? They don't know. And you don't know how that's going to affect you or your customers. It's a place to have a discussion about it and figure out what you need to do about it, which I'm sure we'll talk about. But yeah, I think be realistic, be cognitive of what's going on, and listen, don't stick your head in the sand. But likewise, on the other flip side, don't let it bury you in negativity and woe is me and go down that spiral. You've got to stay positive and put your energy into what's going to make a difference now, and plan ahead, figure out, and be willing to be agile, right? If we didn't all learn that with COVID, how agile do we have to get quickly with COVID and pivot and do all these wondrous things? Well, this is just a different challenge, right? COVID hit everyone. You could look at COVID was a recession. For some businesses, it was the biggest recession they've ever seen. Look at the airline industry, right? It switched them off.
I definitely want to go into the details around the questions that you need to ask of yourself and your buyer. And want to cover that in a moment. One question I want to ask around what you just described, which is how do you maintain that balance of staying positive or staying optimistic, but still being informed and still having to read what's going on out there, because you kind of do need to be informed. So how do you maintain that balance between staying optimistic and being informed when the rhetoric and the narrative might still be negative?
Yeah, I think it's knowing your business, knowing your market, and having a plan and a mitigation plan for what if, right? And it will be different for different businesses, because during COVID incident or recession, whatever the outside factors are that you can't control, different vertical sectors, different businesses, different customer profiles will be affected differently. So there are some businesses in, for example, the pandemic that thrived. If you're in hand sanitizer, boy, did you have something drop on your lap. So there were some businesses that survived, some that were absolutely put into standstill, and others that pivoted. Look at the food restaurants that immediately, they didn't go, oh, we'll have to shut the doors, people can't come out. It was, well, we've still got a kitchen, we still can produce food, they're still going to have to eat. Let's pivot this model quickly and do things differently. So it's about looking at the landscape where you are today, looking at how is this like to affect your target customer and their buying. Do you need to change your ideal customer profile? Your ideal customer profile today may look like this, and if they're the ones that are going to be most affected by this, you may decide not just to switch off and pivot immediately, but actually, right, let's guys, what we need to do, guys and girls in the sales team, we need to absolutely be cognizant. This could be devastating. This could impact our typical customer profile in these ways. This is, we look at what's going on generically, but look at information that is specific and interpret it specific to your business model, your customer, and prepare for it, and start asking questions, start monitoring more closely what's happening. Are sales now taking slightly longer? What's the feedback we're getting? Right. And have a counter plan of, if it impacts them, what are we going to do? What if it impacts them a little bit? Where do we backfill? How do we get through this? And what's the plan for the business? What's the plan for the sales engagement? Who do we target? Does it change our messaging? Do we need to come up with a different package, for example? Is our price point now going to be slightly too high for the interim? Do we sign customers up on potentially a longer contract and give them a couple of years cheaper at the beginning and ramp it? Do we change that model so it's not flat across the excuse me, the subscription? Do we repackage something? Can we change the packaging and do a cut down version or something? It's being creative and off the page of how do we does our customers still want to buy? What's the impact going to have on them, and how do we mitigate that? And do we need to pivot to a different type of customer, a different ICP at this point? What would that entail? What would we need to change? And start having those conversations and planning for it, right? And if you don't need to do it, great. You already planned. Better to have a plan that you didn't execute upon than needing one that you haven't got.
So this is going to sound like an obvious question. So who should be having those kinds of discussions? Because you have salespeople out there that are probably not naturally going to be involved in those kind of discussions. They might feel like it's an uphill struggle to have to push those kind of conversations internally. So who should be having those conversations? And let's get into the detail for that. How do you kind of acquire the information that you need?
Yeah, I think it's the leaders of the business. The leaders of your business have got to do it, and the sales leaders have got to take some responsibility, because whilst it's tactical moves you may have to make, this is something more strategic to the business of the impact it could have. And you're right, that shouldn't be on the shoulders of each salesperson. You can armor up the salespeople for feedback and for insight and what they're hearing, but you've got to own correlating that and validating. I would suggest that, because it's very easy, based on what you said a few moments ago. Think about this: for salespeople to have conversations with customers, prospective customers, and it all to be a woe is us conversation. The customers are, we don't think this, and it's all. How do you know the customers aren't having that impact and that influence from just the news, saying, "Oh my God, we're probably going to slow down our buying because of this"? Is there any substance to that, or is it
Validity,
just
yeah.
their opinion? Yeah. So it's a harder one. It's a perfect opportunity, if you like, if you've got key customers that impact your revenue stream. I would suggest, if you've got 10 customers that are 50% of your revenue stream, I would, as a sales leader, be having conversations with them. If I didn't already have a relationship with them at some level, which I would hope there would be if you're larger clients, I would use this as an excuse to have a conversation with those clients that perhaps could impact your revenue the greatest, should they change their buying pattern at a senior level as well, peer to peer. And that's got to be a professional conversation that the customer views as, what a smart move, right? I want to talk to you as a customer of ours, and it'd be great to have a call like this, or a meeting, whatever. I want to understand, how, we all hear the news and stuff, but how it's going to impact your business, and is there anything together we need to do to support each other as collaborative partners here? And if you're an important supplier to them and they're an important customer to you, surely that's a valid conversation to have, to get real insight from their business leaders. So you've got peer-to-peer talking, and they'll be going through the same, right? If they've got any sense, they'll be evaluating what the impact is going to be to their business, their revenue stream, and of course that has a knock-on effect potentially to you as a supplier as well, depending what you're supplying them. But if they're going to decide they need to cut costs, or they need to hone down on things over a period, that may have a knock-on effect to you that you didn't foresee coming. So why not have those conversations now?
And so I don't know what your observation has been. My observation from the discussions I have with several sales professionals, leaders, and companies is that very few of them, they will say that they need to do that, but very few of them do that quite effectively. I don't know if you're seeing that, and if you are, why is that so difficult?
I think a couple of things, and I'll context this with something else I do. So as a sales leader, and I might have spoken about this, I've certainly spoken about it on different sessions. If we don't win a key prospect that we thought was going to go ahead, not every customer, but I will often prompt that, well, can I have a call with them? Hopefully I've been engaged or something during the process anyway, but even if not, I'd like to have a call with them. And that call's not to try and convince them to change their mind. It's to understand, did we do something wrong? What can we do differently? What can we learn from this? Because we did invest time in this process together, and we haven't been chosen, so we don't win the prize. But the prize for me now then is any learnings we can get from this, so we don't fall into the same traps again. Can you give me that? Sales leaders don't typically do that either, I've observed. And it's not rocket science, but it's getting into the habit of it's an if it's not in your program to do, right, you just do what you always do and you just keep doing it. Well, it's something slightly different. But once you've done it a couple of times and you realize actually it isn't uncomfortable, it's not out of the realms, and often the customer, and it ends up being a really productive call and building a bit of rapport stroke relationship with someone new, even though they're not buying from you right now. So I think it's just that it's not in your normal habitual process, and it sometimes can feel uncomfortable, right? And as a sales leader, if you're not willing to do that and pick up the phone and speak to someone, and I always say to people, whilst I have whatever title I've got, I'm not in an ivory tower. I like being hands-on, engaging with customers. If you're a sales leader who has distanced themselves from that and ended up being in the back room with spreadsheets and CRMs and reports, etc., yeah, that might be uncomfortable because you're getting back out there, and yeah, you're putting your own reputation out there, and your salespeople, yeah, going to look to you for how's this going to turn out, what you're going to do. But you should be
Mm.
leading by example, in my view, and it's a conversation. If you're in sales, conversations are what it's about.
So if you're a sales leader or a salesperson that's going to have these conversations, how should they structure those conversations? So obviously they're going to go in with a plan, right? It's not going to be cold. So what is that plan? What are the topic points or questions that they should always have prepared and ready to have for those kinds of conversations with customers? So not the prospects that didn't
Yep.
end up buying, but the
Yep.
customers that you're trying to identify, what are the changes in behaviors that's happening there? How are they viewing the recession, etc.? Are there specific sets of questions that you would advise?
I think it's about two things. One is transparency, just being upfront. You're talking. This is one of my bugbears in sales, is that people don't just get down to the basics and go, do you know what? It's the interaction is a human being with another human being. Just have a conversation with them, right? Because we try and dress these things up sometimes and go around the houses. Just cut to the chase, be transparent, and tell them that, you know, Dave, I'd like to, Sally, I'd like to be transparent with you in our business. Like yourselves, you're seeing the news, right, and the recession and then the impact. We think we're in a reasonably good position for what's happening, and we've got a good strategy, but we value the input of people like yourselves because you're our lifeblood, you're our customers, you spend the money with us, and any impact on you could ripple through, and you may get insights and you have conversations with in your sector, industry, whatever it be. This is all variable depending on who you're talking to. You will get insights that we don't have access to, and I'd really appreciate your opinion and your expertise to give me your thoughts of I'm sure you're having these discussions in your business. Any you can share with me so that I can get a better understanding, and hopefully it may give me some insight for any of our customers that are going to have some challenges. If there's anything, I don't know if there is, that we can do to better support them and engage with them during this process.
Mm.
Is that not a
Mm.
sensible, just structured, simple, that's why I'm doing it? That's, I want people to go, yeah, that's sensible, and it's a fair question to ask. And also, you're valuing my input. You're seeing some value. You're not just, I haven't positioned as, could you tell me what the impact might be on you from the recession? Because I'm worried about whether your spend changes. Right,
Mm.
that's great. That's all in it for me. I want a mutual conversation. And if there's any insight I can share with you, Sally, in terms of what I'm hearing from other peers of yours, happy to do it. Let's have a conversation about it.
That sounds straightforward and sensible, and I think people have. I've certainly walked away with some ideas there, at least on how to structure that conversation. Right? What if you come across a buyer who is friendly, honest? They're having those kind of adult conversations with you, but their answer is something on the lines of, "Well, we've now basically have to do two things. Number one is procurement, and the CFO is involved in all expenditures." Right? Which is nothing new. We saw that in 2008 financial crash, right? So that's not a new thing. But what if they were to also say, right now we have a mandate that we need to look for at least 10 to 20% cost reduction in spend with each supplier, for example. How would a salesperson, because that would naturally make the salesperson or the sales leader quite nervous. How would you approach
God, you're
That's
putting me on the spot today, right?
we've got to get
It's
practical
like
stuff
role
for
play.
people. Yeah.
It's like role playing, right? So what would I say straight away off the cuff? So Moeed, I really value you being as open to share that with me now. So firstly, thank you for sharing that. Um, it's not something I can just answer right now, as you can appreciate, because that's a big number, and if all of our customers do it, there's a knock-on effect there. But let me tell you this: you're an important customer to us. I believe we've got a good working relationship together, and we want to work together in partnership with you. So let's have some conversations around what your supply is going to look like, and how together we can both come through this in, hopefully with a stronger relationship because of how we work that out together.
Mm,
And you might be thrown in, during COVID, we supported you. It might be that during COVID you did things for them and you're going to call back on the favor. Who knows? So, but without any other context on it, I would sidestep anything right now. Be very thankful for sharing that with me and being upfront, because they're not going to expect you to say, thank you for telling me you want more discount. Well, no, but you're telling me something, and the earlier you tell me that, the better, because
mm,
at least it's not a surprise 3 weeks down. Great. Um, let's have some conversations around that. Now, if I already knew the numbers and what they're producing, whatever, I'd start going into, what's your supply going to look like? Because this is the level you're at the moment. In order to do that, and it depends on your business model and what works for your business. Is it something where if they were to order forward more in advance, is there another break point on the pricing which they could achieve? So in effect, you're not actually giving them anything that you wouldn't have given them anyway, but what you are going to do is take more business up front, perhaps. You need to give me a year's supply up front, and you stock it, and we can move into a different price band, maybe. There's lots of different ways of approaching it. It also obviously impacts on what level of margin you're on, because there is a point where, A, you're not going to agree to any movement. B, certainly not that was a big level of discount. We want 10 or 20% off. Well, my opinion of things like that when they come is that was a nice round number. Round numbers. Now, if he'd said, we need to get about 7.4 to 7.7% average reduction across all our suppliers. Some therefore will be more, some less, because we know margins are different in different types of business. And that's what we're working for. Then great, I can work with that. But to say, well, we need 10 or 20%, straight away it's like, great. Yeah, that's just easy to throw out there. It's
mm,
too round a number and too wide a banding. So you sort of fell into the trap there of give me a clue of, okay, you want something, but no, not everyone's going to roll over and give that, right. But it's a conversation to be had. If you're a salesperson, that's also the point. Depending again what options you've got open to you and how hard that feels. That, if it's an important customer, is a prime one where I'd bring a sales leader in. If that was one
mm,
of my salespeople, I'd say the easy way you do there is say, well, look, I'm going to need to involve someone in the business, because that's a big ask, and let's have those discussions and bring someone in if need be, who's more experienced in having a more senior discussion with their business. And it may be that your sales leader or someone in your business has more senior contacts there, because you described it as being procurement. Well, remember, procurement's job is to get for their business the best structured deal. It doesn't mean the ridiculous deal, because if they've got sense, they want to look after the supplier for a long-term relationship as well. But is to structure the best long-term relationship and optimal transactions for their business.
mm,
And often they get given targets in procurement for reducing spend by a certain amount, and hit this and you get a bonus and all this stuff. So recession is going to be an easy excuse for anyone to say, yeah, well, look, there's a recession on, what price you doing? And to apply pressure using that as leverage, the same as many tried to do with COVID, is because of this third party thing that we all know, and it's, oh, look at the gloom and doom. I'm going to use that as leverage in this conversation and throw that at you and see how you react. And some salespeople will just roll over and go, oh my God, gloom and doom. I've got to give them another 10%, because if not, we're not going to get the business. Well, is it easy for them to change? Have you got value with them that, no, you can't just switch? Depends on your product, right? If it's toilet rolls, is there a lot of differential? If it's a very complex embedded system, well, and it's critical to their business to operate, that ain't going anywhere. So,
Mm.
so it's a variable thing. It's not easy to give a stock answer, right? But I think it's the approach you take with it that's sensible, respectful to that individual, but also thinks about the realities, and again, doesn't get drawn into the, oh my God, there's a recession. This customer's told me they need 10% discount. I believe it, and now I'm working out how I do it.
No, that makes sense. So essentially, acknowledge and thank them for the fact that they're sharing this with you, because they're sharing it with you earlier, theoretically. Do the other great sales approach, which is ask more questions to uncover exactly what's behind that.
Yeah.
Then the other thing you talked at the end is actually know the value of both what you provide, but also where it's positioned for the buyer as well within the macro environment. So is your product something that's easily transferable to a competitor? Or is it something that's going to be very painful for them to do, and therefore that gives you leverage? So knowing your own value and what you do for the buyer and how embedded you are with the buyer is also an important part of that consideration, because are they bluffing with you, etc.? How
Yeah.
far are they willing to push? How far can you push back? So those are
Also
the kind of three
understand your
things.
market, right? Because even if it is a commodity product where there's not a lot of lock-in value, if you
Mm,
know your market well enough, is a competitor, you could just be I know a competitor's not going to go to that price either. Even though they
yeah.
want to win the business, there's a point at which you're not going to do bad business, nor is a competitor just to win they're not going to do a deal that loses some money to win a customer. How's that salesperson going to justify that to their business? Well done, I've just gone and won this new client, but we're doing it at minus cost, right? What?
Mm,
So it's you don't believe everything you heard, and don't get drawn in by this is happening in the market, therefore I'm expecting people to ask for, I was expecting them to ask for a big discount. Well, they did, and now you're self-validating it. And because you're expecting it, and because they've asked, it must be real. And now I better do something about it. Step back. Ask your colleagues what's happening with similar businesses if you've got them as customers, because typically your ICP will have some commonality. Well, none of the others are
mm,
doing that. Check out their financials. Oh,
mm,
they've just reported growth this year, and they're doing really, really well. And check out they're recruiting another 30 XYZ people in the next 6 months. I can see it on their website. Hang on a second, this business isn't in desperation. So yeah, they've got to look at costs for a recession, but have they really been told to reduce all costs by that much? And at whatever cost of relationship?
mm,
No, probably not. So it's do your diligence and put it in context of reality of that individual discussion and transaction, not the perceived reality of the news, which is very generic, right?
mm,
The
mm,
world goes on. The world went on during COVID. Look at COVID saying all the airlines are going to go bust, and all the things news that we've all forgotten now, things that were going to happen that actually weren't quite as bad as they made it out was going to be, the impact. And we're now on flights again, and we're now mixing again, and it all
mm.
seems in the dim distant past. Yes, there was an impact, but the world didn't stop, and we got through it. Now this is the next thing. Brexit was the same, right? Yes, it had an impact, but we all fought through it. We mitigated. It had some impacts. Don't get drawn into the hype that it's all gloom and doom, and it's therefore every bad thing that looks bad is bad. It may not be. Qualify, and qualify as hard, if not harder than you ever would have done before. Ask lots of questions, dig in around it, because if something isn't in truth, if you dig around and ask the right questions, you're going to figure that out, right? That's the job of a
Mm.
good salesperson.
Yeah. So yeah, that's super, super valuable and interesting here. If we think about what you've described so far in terms of getting ready for a recession, what you need to do to prepare for a recession, right? If we think about it in terms of categories, so the first category you talked about was almost, let's call it mindset, right? It's about having that balance of optimism without being delusional, right? So I use the word optimism instead of positivity, because sometimes positivity can just become delusional. So optimism
Yeah.
was one. Customer was the other, which included knowing your ideal customer profile, what's going to change, having those conversations with your customers. That was the other category, let's call it. The other category you talked about was pricing, right? Pricing and product. Do I need to adapt our pricing to support our customers through this? What are the structures of the deals that we should be prepared to flex on based upon certain circumstances? So there seem to be three categories there: mindset, customer, and the pricing. What other categories should sales professionals look at when it comes to this, when it comes to preparing for a recession?
Well, I think the big one that goes across all of it for me is conversation. And by that, I mean conversation like we're talking now, not electronic communication, is engage and converse with people, because you'll get feeling out of it, right? And you'll get emotion out of it. What's happening? Oh, crikey, we're having these. Talk to them about it, and qualification. So conversation and qualification. Have conversations where you're asking lots of sensible questions, and you're finding out the realities that's going on, and you're getting, and therefore from that you'll get understanding. From conversation, qualification, questioning, you will get a better understanding of the reality that is going to affect, is relevant to you, your market, your customers, your business. And that's what matters, not the fact that, oh my god, this is happening, da, da, da. Okay, but how does it relate to me? How does it relate to us? That's the key thing that's important, not the generic stuff, right? How's it going to affect us, and therefore what do we need to do, if anything, to mitigate against the risks involved here? Because the more you understand that, the more information and insight you can get, the more you can figure out, other edge cases, and there may be in your customer base edge cases where, because of who their market is or their customer is, they're going to be greatly affected. But your other customers are going to be fine, because actually they're not affected by what's going on in the recession, because I don't know, their customers are high net worth individuals who don't get affected by this stuff, which we can all debate and argue about. But or there's certain things even in recession that people need and don't get affected. So you've got to figure that out. Is it all of your customer base that's going to impact you? What is the truth of this? And the only way you can do that is by getting out there and talking to people and understanding it, and not just reading. You can't go online and Google it, right? Well, if you go online and Google something, any symptom you've got is you're going to be running to the hospital with, panicking, right? Because you'll get the headline pieces, but not everything points to the same. So the same with this, right? Oh, massive recession, gloom and doom, X number of years, we're all screwed. Oh God, right, okay. Oh God, okay. Or, well, I've spoken to my clients and I've spoken to this and I've understood their impact. Yes, there's some risks to them, but it's going to be minimal because of this. This client's really going to is in danger, and that's what they represent to they're 12% of our revenue. So let's factor in, we could, at very worst case, lose totally 12% of our revenue if they totally went elsewhere. Or do we mitigate that, and we do something, and we figure a structure out with them? How do you mitigate that impact? But the maximum impact therefore is 12%, or you might factor in 12 to 20% with some padding. Okay, that's big, but that's not going to kill us. And if it does happen, what do we need to do? What's the knock-on effect, and what actions we'd need to take, or we should take now, to protect against that impacting our business? Right? But it's doing it with insight and information that's relevant to you, not generic stuff which may not be.
Okay, so that's the fourth one, which is conversations. You haven't mentioned skills, developing skills, competencies. And I'm curious, what are your thoughts around how people should approach that when it comes to the recession? So whether you're a sales leader or whether you're, I mean, maybe we could start with, sellers themselves, people that have a quota. How should they think about their own competencies and skills in preparation for recession?
So I'm not so sure if you're good. It varies than if it wasn't a recession, right? Because for me, and again, I speak about this often, to be good salespeople, there are some fundamentals that if you're good at, and you hone and you practice and you focus on, they'll carry you through this. Look, what I was talking about is conversation. So I see too much customer engagement going on electronically, and we're all foul of that. And I'm not going to say in the past I haven't done it, right? But it's very easy to fall into the trap of email communication, apologies, and thinking it's a conversation. And oh yeah, we've had emails go back 10 times from the customer. And I've seen this with any business I've worked with, where salespeople, and those that have worked with and for me will recognize this, where I've seen the customer ask a question about something or send some information over, and they just reply, oh, here you go, here's that information. They don't ask why the information, what you're going to do with it, What's the relevance? They just say, oh, I'll put something together for them and give them it. I'm just serving up and ticking a box. There, I've progressed it. Not necessarily. Why didn't you just reply and say, that's interesting, I've got some stuff on that, but to make sure I get you the right information, why don't we jump on a quick call and have a conversation with them, right? And you can ask questions, and the more questions you ask, and the sensible questions, you get more insight and information as to where this could go together. So I think that's the biggie, and whatever happens, whether it was COVID or anything, I've said to salespeople, have more conversations with customers. Not everything, some stuff email has its place, right? Absolutely, it's a blend of the two. But think, should this be a conversation because it's about something meaningful? It's not just, yeah, is the meeting still on at 10 tomorrow? You don't have to phone them for that, right? Yeah, yes, confirm, yeah, absolutely, look forward to speaking. That's fine. I'm really curious about, can you tell me how you do this in your system and how it comes up with those sort of answers? Absolutely. Let's jump on a call. Let's have a conversation. Because first thing I'm going to ask is, it's really pleased that you're interested to understand more. What's behind it? Why do you want to understand? What's behind you asking that question? Oh, my boss asked me because da 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 da. Oh, okay. Well, why don't we get him on the call then? You know, it's basic selling. Conversation you need to have more conversation, and you need to be better at questioning, you know, and get rid of happy. There's too many salespeople ask a couple of questions, hear what they want to hear is in terms of, oh yeah, can we look at this, or can we trial your system, or whatever it is, and see that as a positive. Okay, appreciate you'd like to trial it. That is something that's possible. What is it you're looking to trial, and why? What are you looking to achieve from this? As opposed to, yeah, absolutely, let me set you up on a trial and I'll call you in 3 weeks and see how you've kicked the tires and what's happened, with no control, no understanding of why you're doing it. It's fundamentals, right? More conversations, more questions. And this is things like this are times to do it. These are not times to hype behind email. These are the times you should be having conversations, because perceivably they're harder conversations because they're about, you know, you could argue sensitive subjects.
You've mentioned conversations quite a lot, so I really want to get into the heart of this, right? And I know what your answers are going to be, because we've had you and I've had this discussion before. But for the benefit of the viewers and listeners, if having good quality conversations is so ubiquitous and so important, what are the fundamental skills or behaviors or attitude that will make you a better sales conversationist or questioner?
Well, you hit part of it in the question, in what you said then, is the questioning. So there's so many fundamentals to this, right? So 2 ears, 1 mouth, right? It should be a conversation, not a pitch. The number of salespeople, oh, you know, this is the pitch we use. It kills me when I even hear those words. It's no. It shouldn't be about your product or solution. It should be about you know, outcomes, challenges, problems, which may lead to something you can do. But too often, and I'm sure people will recognize this, and I've had customers say this in fact, interesting, I'll give an example in a second. Too often the conversation goes, let's ask some questions, let's get a few bits of insight of information, and now let me flip it. That's great. Now let me tell you about us. Da, da, da. Right. That's not a conversation. It's, let me get to my pitch. And I remember one example, so this, to put it into context, where a number of years ago, maybe 7-8 years ago now, a very specific one, because of how this meeting went. An individual came to see me in the business, being my salesperson. They were looking at competitors who were, you know, we didn't have the brand. These other three had major brands, global. We were the David and 3 Goliaths. Came in, and I said, look, we can show you loads of stuff we do. We can show you presentations and demo, and we'll show you that. Before we get to that, if it's relevant to get to that, can we ask about and understand the business why you're doing this at all? Why have you taken the trouble to see us, and ask lots of questions and find out together where the fit is and the value? Does that make sense? Yeah, we spent 2 hours asking questions, conversation. Well, why would you want to do it that way? Have you thought about anything different? But right at the end, that individual, I remember this, we hadn't shown anything, turned around and said, do you know what, I'm exhausted. The questions have been brilliant. I'm tired. And you've asked questions that none of the others asked, some that I don't even know the answer to, about my own project. So this has been really valuable to me. And yeah, and now we ended up winning that project. It's not just because of that. but we knew we were, whether we were qualifying, are we a good fit together? Not, I'm assuming I'm a good fit together. Give me a few things so I can start selling to you. And that individual then said, do you know what the other three did? And they did exactly what I just said, is they asked this little bit of questions. They went through their standard piece, and as fast as they could, they wanted to show how wonderful we are. Here's all our logos, and show me stuff. Right? And that's a habit salespeople get into, is show and tell. And it has its place. You can't jump on a call, for example, with a prospect and just go barrage them with questions and then do nothing. But there's a balance. A conversation is a balance. And we're talking here, it's not, it's a bit of a conversation, but it's a different medium, right? It's a podcast. But there is a balance in those of mutual, both of you coming out with mutual insight and mutual benefit from that call, from that meeting. And I think that gets lost. And it's no different going into recession discussions, pandemic discussion, whatever it is. If you're good at the fundamentals, building rapport, asking questions and having a conversation and making the conversation real, right? Not a salesperson's conversation. A typical salesperson's conversation, people see it all the time. And it's like, yeah, as opposed to it was a business person to a business person having some engagement and figuring out together if there's anything, any actions or anything to do together or whatever, but also learning some stuff from each other.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah, this is, man, the time has really flown here, Ian. There's a huge number of things, valuable things that you've shared here. And, luckily I've got a note-taking system that's captured all that. And I hope our viewers and listeners have done so as well. I have a quick question I want to ask, which I ask all our guests when they come on the show. Which 3 books would you recommend that our viewers and listeners really must read?
Crikey, I wish you'd pre-warned me with that one. So it might be ones that I'd answered last time I was on, because I can't remember what, it was a little while ago. So, crikey.
Well, maybe they're the 3 most recent books that you've read that really impressed you.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. Business. So ones that come to mind, and I'll do easy ones. So I do Social Selling by Tim Hughes. He's just released an updated version of that, because the world keeps changing. But that addresses the misuse of salespeople of social selling, and what they think they're doing, which doesn't work, and how it really works pretty simply. The £1 million.
We're going to have him on the show actually soon.
Fantastic.
So I got a sneak preview of that new book. So I would, I would agree with you on that for sure.
£1 million LinkedIn message. It's sort of a parallel to that by Dan Disney. Dan's called to speak all over the place. He might be someone you want to get on as well, because Dan's a great speaker on it, and he's brought himself into this world, and just through his own passion figured out where he can give value and created his own business and brand around it. Yeah, those are 2 good ones that have been out there, and good simple reads that they're not heavy, and you'll get insight from and get some snippets, quick wins from.
Yeah, great, love it. How can our viewers and listeners learn more about you and get in contact?
Sure, thank you. Yeah, easy. If you go to ianmoyse.co.uk or ianmoyse.cloud, that'll take you to my 2 main social profiles where you can follow and engage.
Ian, thank you so much for coming on again and sharing your pearls of wisdom in just a few short minutes. But I think that was incredibly valuable. So thank you again for coming on, Ian.
Moe, thank you so much for inviting me. Take care.
Thank you. So this is Moe Amin signing off. If you are interested in how to get growth certainty and how to use strategies, principles, and tools that are proven to be successful, then do look at our programs in terms of the neuroscience of selling and the process for decision making and how you can reverse engineer that. Links in the show notes if you want to contact me. But until the next episode, thank you for being a listener.